I say, who's your lender? Why do you trust them to not take advantage of you? I put the fear into them because the fear should be there. Lending can be kind of predatory, and I mean, it can be. And so they need to understand that having a trusting relationship with the person that's doing their loan is so important. Just being a file at a bank, that doesn't cut it for me. That doesn't cut it for a lot of people. If you work with my person, I work with them because our values align, and both of us couldn't sleep at night if we were taking advantage of people. Also, we both work by referral, so we only get more business because we do such a good job for you that you want your friends and family to have the same experience. If either one of us was taking advantage of you, you're not going to want your friends and family to have that same experience. We'd be shooting ourselves in the foot.
Welcome to the Uncensored Real Estate Podcast, where nothing is off limits. If you're interested in buying, selling, or investing in real estate, and you want to learn some of the insider secrets and uncensored truths from the true professionals in and around real estate, you've come to the right place. Now, let's buckle up for the uncensored truth about real estate and join your host, Brian Cardenas.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us on the Uncensored Real Estate Podcast today. We have a special guest from just outside of Everett, Washington, which is north of Seattle. We have with us Holly Chanel with John L. Scott Real Estate. Welcome, Holly.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me.
So we've been friends for a really long time, right? So,
it's 2 weeks.
So yeah, we actually met at a mastermind conference, and Holly was good enough to join a bunch of mortgage people and tell us how we should be doing our jobs better. And so we really got tons of great information from her. And so I figured it'd be good to have her come on, because as our goal here is to try to get good information to the consumer, I know that you've got a lot of great insights that we wanted to have you share. And so I always like to kind of start things off with just asking you to give us a little bit of insight on what is something that you see that the consumers don't really know about the real estate industry that they should know?
Okay. Thank you, Brian. That is a really good and loaded question. If I zoom all the way out and I was to say one thing that I would want people to understand is that every agent is not created the same. The bar of entry to get into the industry is quite low, and we are all independent contractors. We don't really have, a boss, so to speak, that is making sure that we are doing a business or doing our business a certain way, right? So the way that each agent runs their business is entirely up to them. Training that they have selected for themselves, there is like minimum required training for agents. So because it can be so willy-nilly, when you are picking somebody to represent you, you just don't want to assume that, two agents are the same just because they work for the same company, or that your aunt that just got her license is going to do the same job for you as someone that's been working in that neighborhood a long time. And even then, I would like to tell people that experience and like seniority in the industry makes a difference. And sadly, I've worked with a lot of seasoned agents that write horrible contracts or don't understand a lot of things. And so that makes it even more overwhelming. How to coach someone to make sure you're choosing somebody well. I can dig into that more, but that would be like the big thing to understand is one is not necessarily like the other. So as the consumer, you really do have to do your due diligence to have lengthy conversations, to give time for professionals to show you and illustrate what X factors they bring to the table and why they would be a good fit for you.
So that's like what I always tell people, that the consumer has the job really, really difficult, because exactly what you're talking about, there's no set out path. There's no formula. There's not somewhere to go look and say, oh, this person's better than this person. It really is quite subjective. And yet there are some things that you can actually investigate and learn from, like experiences. The length of time of experience can be deceiving. Like you just mentioned, I've run across agents that have been doing this as long as I have, 27 years. And you would wonder, like, have they done 27 transactions in those 27 years?
Right.
There's others that have been doing it, for 2 or 3 years. and they've done a good number of transactions, but they're highly professional. They're very good at their craft, and they do a lot of learning, which is, like you said, incumbent upon them to take it upon themselves to figure out, hey, how do I educate myself? So like, if you put your consumer hat on, like, what are some of the things that consumers should do to try to learn as much as they can when they're trying to select an agent?
Okay. Interview. I feel like, the average consumer feels a little intimidated by this. They don't know what questions they're supposed to ask. I've definitely learned from clients that they feel awkward interviewing 3 agents and then knowing that they have to reject 2. And so that's like number one for the consumer to know is as a professional, we are used to being interviewed. I welcome it because when my clients make that choice, I want them to feel like, yes, this is my girl. She's going to get me to the finish line. And if they don't feel that resonance with me, then I'm not the good fit for them. And I want them to feel that with somebody. So for me, I welcome the competition because at the end of the day, I want them to have the fit that's best for them. So anyways, as professionals, we're used to it. So don't worry about the rejection or the confrontation that you feel may come from it. It is normal. It is expected from us. And if you did run into an agent that was going to take it hard or be weird that you were talking to others, then that's a big red flag to know that they're not really professional. So either way, in that interview process, I think that that's really key. And so an agent will come to the table and definitely have some sort of presentation for you. I would let them just go off and do their thing and sit back and see how that differs from one person to another. But then I would definitely, as the consumer, have a lot of questions for these agents. And if you're talking to at least 3, I think one would really stand out as unique and different and like really got that. And if you talk to 3 and none of them feel like that exciting, then keep going.
So like, what would be a good question for a consumer to ask their agent?
Okay. I would, if I was a consumer, I would ask an open-ended question that was, why should I work with you over anyone else? And then just shut up and see what that agent, they either will be excited to answer that question and let you know what their X factors are, because they should know that. And if they kind of stumble and don't know how to answer that, then again, like that's a red flag I would want to know as a consumer.
Yeah. So it's not like a multiple choice question where you got to pick the right one. I mean, I love that you're asking them to, just ask an open-ended question, because you're right. You will see if someone is comfortable and confident and really spelling out what their differences are and what the value is that they bring to the table.
Yeah. And then I would ask for specific stories. If you're a seller, tell me your top 2 most successful stories where you were the reason your sellers overcame in something great or made a lot of extra money or something. Like, tell me your best success stories for your sellers or for your buyers, whatever the consumer is. And hopefully the agent has something great to share, because I could definitely tell you times that I had made all the difference for my buyers and sellers. And that's what you want to know. Like, any agent can put a home in the MLS or open a door. Where picking your agent is really going to matter is when it gets gritty, when you're competing against 10 other offers, or when you've sat on the market for a month. So those are the kind of questions I would see how that agent has performed in the past in those situations. And I would ask for references. I would conduct an interview like you are hiring someone to work. You're really hiring an agent.
Yeah.
And it's like the biggest investment of most people's lives. And so I would take it that seriously, and I would ask for references, and I would call them.
So like, picking up on what you just said as far as the story, like, give me an idea, as a listing agent, then, like, what's a recent story? Because I think we've all got a lot of stories in this market. It's been crazy. Give us an example of something where, you feel like you made the difference in being able to get a transaction put together for a seller.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. So this has happened a few times where we're in this crazy market where a home could sell in 5 hours if you let it. And so it's kind of uncharted territory. We haven't had it be this extreme before until COVID happened. And so what I've seen happen so many times is a home hits the market. They have an intended review date for the expecting multiple offers, for the seller to review all those and pick the best one. And buyers will be desperate and they will put in an early offer and try to blow the seller's socks off. And far too many times I've seen these homes go pending on day 1 or day 2 before the weekend traffic even has a chance to come through. And so in most cases, some of these cases that I know the details, I had a buyer that wanted to see it on Saturday. It goes pending day one. I call the listing agent and say, hey, tell me about this offer you took. What was so stellar about it that you didn't let the weekend happen and you took it? I can't tell you how many times they've told me what they took, and my buyer would have absolutely written a better offer. I feel like there's a natural immaturity for agents and sellers alike, and I'm not holding it against them, but it's new territory. And so it's really easy to be like, oh, this offer is amazing. I just can't imagine any better. Like, let's just take it. And I feel like that's negligent. It is my job to represent my seller's best interest and make them the most money on the home. And so if you get a really strong offer on day one, yay, I think that's a sign of what's more to come in the market. And in a market with very low inventory, if they can't go out and buy any home similar in that city, those people are very likely to stick around and still write that same offer or better a few days later on the review date. So a specific example, this home was listed for $575,000, which was already $50,000 more than that same floor plan had just sold in the neighborhood. So we already listed like a little high. We got an offer at $630,000 on day one, waived contingencies, released earnest money, everything. My sellers listened to me and waited because I asked that agent, if my seller doesn't respond to this offer today, what's going to happen? My buyers don't want anything but this home. We'll resubmit our offer on Monday. Okay, so there's really no threat, because I think that's why sellers take these early offers, is they feel like the offer is going to go away if they don't take it in that moment. And if that's not true, then let everybody else come through, let everyone compete. So in this case, the home sold. We waited for the review date. It sold for an additional $50,000 over that first offer that seemed too good to be true. Those buyers did not win, but those buyers did come back to the table with $30,000 more on offer review date. And I have seen that happen multiple times. So those early exciting offers often I don't think are actually the buyer's best offer anyways. So I think it's negligent when people just get excited and take an offer just because it's exciting. Early.
Yeah, and I think in this market, it's crazy not to realize that, you're holding all the cards as the seller.
Yes.
And if somebody is going to make an offer that quick and they're not willing to give it a couple of days, there's not a great chance that they're going to find another comparable property to go get under contract on. So I would probably guess, 95% of the time they're going to stick it out. You just have to have patience and let the market dictate, what's going to come over the next couple of days. Because we have a group out here that, is doing that whole thing. Like, it's 3 days and then they don't let you see the property. Like, they give 1 hour for showings.
Wow.
And they're probably coming up there too. I'll leave the name out of it, but
okay.
They've taken some, pretty aggressive tactics on the listing side and kind of rub some people the wrong way. But it's one of those things where, they feel like they're controlling everything because they have the listing. And in some respects, they're kind of right. Now, how far do you take that? That's kind of like an ethics question that everybody has to answer for themselves. But it is the nature of the market. It's like, it's crazy. There's way more buyers than there are sellers. And so you just have to be patient, not lose your cool, and realize that if you've got a good agent representing you, they're not steering you the wrong way. That's a big piece of everything here. So you mentioned some of the things that you're seeing in your market in terms of contingencies. Can you kind of fill us in on what are some of the creative strategies on the buying side that maybe you're seeing or using as a buyer's agent to get your offers accepted?
Good question. So besides the obvious things of the price that the seller wants, higher earnest money, really a lot of it has to do with the financing, because if a buyer's getting a loan, everything is riding on that lender and that loan to be completed. So for my buyers, it is critical for them to be pre-underwritten with a lender, because sellers are savvy, listing agents are savvy, and regular old bank approvals aren't cutting it in my market anymore. So with a good lender that has a good reputation comes the ability to not have a financing contingency in their offer, which goes a long way. And I'm a big fan of how can buyers compete on homes without paying more money? You're going to have to pay more than list price, likely. But if you have other strong strengths, you're not just only throwing more money at the seller to try to stand out. You're standing out with strengths as well. And I've been the winning offer many times without being the highest price because I had these other ducks in a row for my buyers. So solid.
Wait, are you saying that the highest price isn't always the one that wins? Is that what you're telling me?
Absolutely.
We try to tell people that all the time. That's absolutely correct.
Yeah. So a good lender takes care of a lot of that. Different lenders have different, faster appraisals or different things that they can offer their buyer, faster closes if they're underwritten. So I think the question was like, what can buyers do, or like in this market, to be more competitive? And it's having your financial ducks in a row. And you could have, this, we've talked about it a little bit. You could have the most well-qualified buyer, but if they're really stuck on using their bank, they've banked out for 20 years, that doesn't have a good reputation for home loans, then their approval isn't fairly representing them. So that's one thing for consumers to understand is you can know that you're a good buyer, but if you don't put a good lender in front of you with that approval, you could be shooting yourself. I've had buyers lose out on homes because they weren't underwritten, or it was a bank that had a bad reputation in my area, and they had to learn the hard way that it really does matter who you're getting your financing with.
Yeah, we talk to people all the time, and people have that long-term relationship with their bank, even though they have no idea who the loan officer is at the bank. They just happened to stop by there one day, and that was who was sitting there. Right. But they have that, or they'll go online and they'll search for interest rates or what have you, and they'll get that. But in this market, it doesn't really matter. It's one of the things I always try to educate buyers on. Is like, you can have a long-term relationship with your lender or your bank. You can have the lowest interest rate on the planet, and if you don't actually get the house because of who your lender was, what good did all that do? Like, you don't have the house. You can go to your dinner party and say, "Hey, look at this rate quote I got." Like, well, no, right. But I got this great rate quote.
Right.
So, to your point, I think the relationship that you have with a lender is important. And sometimes the consumer wants to know, well, what do you get out of it, Holly? By referring your lender of choice or your title company of choice or your inspector, what's in it for you?
A successful deal that closes, which accomplishes all of your goals as a buyer.
So yeah, that's what it boils down to. You don't get paid if your buyer doesn't get the house.
Absolutely not.
So it's your interest in making sure that they have the trusted, reputable vendors that you're referring, because it gets them what they want, right?
Right. And people need to understand there's no kickbacks. That's highly illegal. We work with our people because we know that that's what gets the job done. And it's my duty, my agency duty to my clients to look out for their best interests. So when I'm educating them on preferred vendors, that's where that is coming from. I wouldn't sleep at night if I was referring clients to a mediocre lender that wouldn't even benefit me. But I sleep at night knowing we're going to get results, and they're going to get a home faster than average buyers in the market because they've got, their ducks in a row. We're writing a complete offer. We should talk about complete offers at some point.
Yeah, go there.
Okay. I'm trying to summarize, what would it come down to? What can a consumer do about it? Because I can tell you all day long what problems are with agents. Because I see negligence all the time behind the scenes with agents that I'm working with. It's so hard for me when I see negligence happening that the client doesn't know. It makes me want to pick up the phone and call them, but I absolutely am not allowed to do that. So if I can get the message out to anyone listening and it helps, that would be great. So when I get offers on my listings, I get multiple offers, and I often see weird terms and weird contingencies in there that just don't make sense. Or they may make sense if the buyer really needs it. And so I call the buyer's agent to ask about the terms of the offer and to make sure that I'm understanding where the buyer is coming from. Because in a market where offers with nearly no contingencies win, if you see a lot of contingencies in there, I'm not saying the buyer shouldn't have those, but I just want to understand where they're coming from with each contingency so I can explain it to my seller and we can make our decision from there. So many times when I call the buyer's agents and I say, hey, I see you have a title contingency in there. We've provided the title report. What is it that the buyer is looking for on the title report that they want to have this contingency for? Oh, I just put it in there. I hear that all the time. And I kind of played down. Oh, your buyer didn't choose that? No, my office just tells me to put that in every offer. Okay, so do you want to talk to the buyer and see if they need that contingency? Oh yeah, we can just take it out, no problem. Okay, so now what we need to understand is I do more than a lot of other agents, right? When you get 10, 15, 30, 50 offers in this market, you don't always have time to call. You don't want to bank on the listing agent calling every buyer's agent and asking these questions. I do because I want to understand everything. And for me, honestly, it's a little bit of a backdoor education process, because I'm not calling them and saying like, you really messed up, but I hope that they learn through the conversation, like, oh crap, that almost cost us the offer. Maybe I should rethink just putting things like littering my offers with my own opinions. So I've had that done with inspection contingencies, financing contingencies. It's just something that the buyer's agent just was told that they should put in there. And then I have the conversation. They send me a new offer that is now at the top with the other offers, because the buyer actually didn't mean to have those terms in there in the first place. So now I know that buyer just signed off on everything and didn't actually understand what was in the contract. So if we could get anywhere with this, it would be for the buyers to not just trust your agent, even if you think they're stellar. They may have awesome communication skills. You may just think they may sell 100 houses a year, but if they're just putting something in there because they think it belongs in there and it doesn't, that could be a reason a buyer loses a house. Absolutely. This has a title contingency. This offer does not. They're the same exact terms. This one wins that doesn't have the title contingency. And so read the offers, ask your buyer or ask your buyer's agent these questions. If you're like, hey, this says I have 10 days to back out in this event, tell me more about that. Oh, you as the buyer, you're writing the offer, you're choosing the terms. Make sure when you sign that offer, you understand everything and it is being sent to the listing agent the way that you want it to be.
Yeah, I think one big overriding message that buyers could understand in this market is, they know this, it's a seller's market, but what does that really mean? And what that means is you need to cater your offer to the seller. And if you think about things from the seller's perspective, if you're throwing in all these contingencies and all these added clauses and things like that, look at it from the seller's perspective, because that's all that matters right now.
Right.
Is look at it from the seller's perspective. If I've got to have all these extra things in here, or even if they're legitimate things, but not necessary, the perception that it's going to give to the seller is, why are they putting all these things in here? Is this going to be a difficult transaction to get through? Are they going to be nitpicking every little thing that comes across? And it just gives the wrong impression. The fact that you're making calls to the buyer's agent on these things, despite what you see at first blush, is extremely commendable on your part. It is also extrememely rare. More often than not, I tell, one of the things that we do when our buyers are making an offer is I tell the agent, let me know when you're doing that. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually record a video talking about your qualifications, more than what's in our pre-qualification form, because here we have a form, you guys use a letter, and it just doesn't give a whole lot. And so I want them to understand a little bit more about their situation. Obviously not giving them credit scores and income and all that kind of stuff, but just more detail. And I let them know, hey, we're going to be proactive, we're going to communicate, we're going to do all these things that are important to the seller. But oftentimes the buyer's agent doesn't give me the chance to do that. They just send in an offer. And then I'm following up with them and saying, hey, would you guys send in an offer? What happened? I didn't see anything, and then I never get a call from the listing agent. And, oh no, it was rejected. You're not letting me help you get your offer accepted. And what happens is when I don't get looped in to help out and do my part, it's less than probably 15, 20% of the time that a listing agent takes the time to contact me and ask about their qualifications and their financing. So if you think about it from that perspective, if I'm going to throw this thing in there, it needs to be really good, because the listing agent's probably not going to call and ask any questions in most cases. And you've shot yourself through. You lost out your chance.
Yeah.
So like if the buyers think about it from the seller's perspective, then like you're saying, question the things that the agent's putting in the contract. I don't know about Washington, but in Arizona, I mean, it's a pretty thorough contract. It's 9 pages, and what most of the brokers tell you is don't add anything into it that's not already in there, because everything's been addressed. And like for these waivers of contingencies, they've got a form for that. So like they don't want you writing random stuff into the contract. So as a buyer, if you see that, like you said, ask your agent why. Like, why is this on here?
Yes, because furthermore, besides weird contingencies, and if you, like we said, there could be legitimate contingencies, of course, right? And that's why I call and ask, what is this about? So if you, as a buyer, you know that you're asking for a title contingency because you need to know if you can turn that basement into a daycare or something like that, then make sure that your agent is presenting the offer and explaining that so the listing agent and the sellers don't have to wonder, hey, we only need a 2-day contingency because we want to make sure we can do X, Y, and Z. And then maybe the seller and listing agent can help you get the answer sooner. Just communicate. It's a conversation. But what I was going to say is also make sure your offer looks complete. And I get the weirdest verbiage, that agents make up and put in offers, and it's either redundant or it puts my sellers in a really sketchy place, just the way that agents just start typing up. We're not lawyers. We're not supposed to be typing up verbiage like that. So to me, it shows me you're an incompetent agent if I get an incomplete offer or you've done a bunch of weird redundant things and now we have a really messy contract. And if I have a clean one over here that's the same or better, I'm just going to roll with that one. So, and then in that situation, your agent lost you the house and you'll probably never know that.
Yeah, that's the toughest part about it is you don't know why. And even if the agent got told why, are they really going to communicate that back to their client?
No, never.
I screwed up. It's my fault.
Never. I have actually had fantasies of a buyer calling me, and because there's been some that have been I can't even tell you the craziest stuff I've seen. And I'm like, I wish if that buyer could call and say, hey, I lost out on this house. If you could give me feedback, I would probably have to ask my broker, can I tell them how bad their agent was? I don't know. But I just would wish for them to get that information.
So you want a house, but you keep getting beat out by all the cash buyers and institutional investors. So what do? Well, you need to call us at the Cardenas team at Finance of America Mortgage. We can turn you into a cash buyer even if you need a mortgage, so you can beat out the competition and get the home that you want. Visit us at www.thecardenasteam.com or call us at 480-331-4684 to schedule a free consultation. The Cardenas team, we treat you like family.
Well, the market is crazy if we're making agents like you have fantasies about being able to talk to buyers. And I was like, wait a minute, what's going on with your life?
I know.
It's almost like a nightmare that you just dream about. So when you're representing the seller, then you kind of touched on it. Are the contingencies thing is kind of obvious, but what is the most important things that, aside from price, obviously everybody gets price, what is the most important thing that you would look for then in a buyer's offer to make you feel confident in accepting it?
The financing. I put in my offer instructions, if you're going to have a financing contingency, please be cognizant about, we have different timelines. I won't get into all the, but there's a way for a buyer to have a financing contingency and shorten it up or make it more appealing to the seller. And so I say, we are going to really be looking at these terms. And often I'll get an offer. It has a 21-day financing contingency, which is 21 days is what our average closing is in this area. So I get this offer and I say, okay, the buyer wants protection on their earnest money for their financing the whole way through the contract. Yet when I talk to their lender says, oh, they're already out of underwriting. There's no way it's not closing. We've done all this. Really solid buyer. So then and I love when that happens, because then I get to call the buyer's agent and say, okay, I'm hearing this from the lender, but in the offer, I'm seeing an extremely cautious buyer that doesn't want to put his earnest money on the line ever in the contract. He wants protection through closing. So let's close this gap. And I say, what is the buyer concerned about? Oh, they're not concerned at all. Okay. So then they're just really naturally afraid. And this is the exact conversation. I make them come up with an answer because I want to know, Because often enough, what I know is that agent did not educate their buyer on what the financing contingency means and what those time periods and terms mean. I know that that buyer didn't actually make a cognizant decision to have a 21-day financing contingency. The agent just put it in there. So when I call and I make them have to answer as to why it's in there, and they don't have, they're stuck in a hard place because they don't want to say, oh, the buyer's scared. They say the buyer has no concerns. Well, okay, so maybe you should talk to them and like let me know if you want to update those terms to reflect what you're telling me about the buyer's stance.
So
I don't know if I answered your question, but
yeah, but I mean, I think the big thing for people listening and watching is like you're unusual. Like I'll just tell you, you're unusual in that you're calling and doing all of this legwork. I mean, you're doing it because you feel like it's what you're supposed to do to represent your seller, which is fantastic. Most agents don't even take the time. Like I will just tell you flat out, they don't take the time. So it's so important to ask those questions you're talking about as a buyer to make sure that your best foot is put forward the very first time, because oftentimes you don't get a second chance.
no,
That is the reality of things. So you've got to know what your agent is doing and, question it in a good way, like you said. And so like you touched on before, people might have a bank relationship that they've had or whatever. So when they come to you with that relationship, say, oh yeah, I've been pre-approved by my bank or an online company or whatever, my cousin, like, what is that conversation? What does that sound like from your side of it? Because I will talk to agents and I will try to get them to, have a way of having that discussion where the buyer can understand it's really in their best interest. But I would love to hear that from you. Like, how does that conversation go?
Okay, so you're my buyer and you tell me I'm approved with Bank of America because I banked with them for 20 years and I love them. And I'll say, okay, I understand. I have a lot of buyers that, you feel comfortable in your bank. How do you know your lender? And they usually don't, because like you said, it's the salesperson sitting in the chair in the bank. That's actually not the person that's going to originate their loan. So I educate them on that. In a bank, most often, that person is going to sit there and they made all the promises in the world to you. We'll close in 21 days. We'll do this. We'll do that. And in my experience, when we get under contract, it gets passed off onto someone. So now we're meeting Billy Bob that just took over your loan and is going to originate it. The person that made all the promises, we're never going to talk to them again. So you don't actually have a relationship with your lender. But then I ask them, I know what my lender can offer, and there's a lot of great things. So I put it on them and say, hey, if it's okay to talk to multiple lenders and see how they compare. What I need to know about your lender is, in a competitive situation, if we're up against a cash offer and we need to close as fast as possible to possibly beat out that cash offer, what's the fastest close they can offer? Do they underwrite you? Do they have the, seller guarantee? How fast are their appraisals? Who do they use for appraisals? Because there can be differences there. And so I task my buyers with getting that information back to me. And most of the time they realize themselves that those bank lenders don't offer any of that stuff. Or if they don't want to, I offer to reach out to that lender myself and ask those questions. So that typically helps. But then I'm very honest in saying there's 3 tiers of lenders. There's like the bottom of the barrel, like online lenders. And then there's like banks and credit unions. And then there's your like local mortgage broker. And I explain those differences to them. I tell them stories about how I've had buyers not win because they were with a bank, that kind of thing. If they're with Bank of America, I'm not trying to trash anyone, but they have one of the worst reputations in this market for home loans. So I tell them they do not have a good reputation. And so the listing agent's going to know that. If it's an experienced listing agent, they know that. And then I tell them the perks of what my lender can offer. And I've never had someone go through the conversation with me and not talk to my lender. And then the relationship is the biggest thing. When I say, who's your lender? Why do you trust them to not take advantage of you? I put the fear into them because the fear should be there. Lending can be kind of predatory, and I mean, it can be. And so they need to understand that having a trusting relationship with the person that's doing their loan is so important. Just being a file at a bank, that doesn't cut it for me. That doesn't cut it for a lot of people. If you work with my person, I work with them because our values align, and both of us couldn't sleep at night if we were taking advantage of people. Also, we both work by referrals, so we only get more business because we do such a good job for you that you want your friends and family to have the same experience. If either one of us was taking advantage of you, you're not going to want your friends and family to have that same experience. We'd be shooting ourselves in the foot. So we will do our best job for you. My lender will not take advantage of you. We'll make sure you're in the best position, tell you everything, be honest. He is so honest that if you do have another lender that has a better deal for you, he'll let you know, because at the end of the day, we both actually just want you to have the best outcome for you. We're here for your journey, no matter how long it takes. They don't have that with the bank lender.
Yeah, and that's the thing that people forget sometimes, is that the banks and like the online companies, those tiers that you talked about, they have a machine set up to get the next person in the door, and the next person in the door, and the next person in the door. The ones that fall out and that get crash into the door and split their head open in the process, they just brush them aside because they got the next one coming in the door. And companies that are local mortgage companies that are built on the referral base and the relationships they have with real estate agents like you, like if we do a bad job, we're not getting that next deal because there's not that revolving door of people coming through. Right. So it's a lot more personalized care, and we make sure that it's a good experience for our clients because that's our livelihood. Like we mess it up, you're not getting the next one because
Perfect.
A lot of real estate agents have a very short-term memory, and if anything goes wrong, it's like on to the next one.
Yeah.
It happens. Sometimes there's things that happen, but it's also really important that if something comes up like that wasn't identified in the beginning, that you just deal with it straight up, and you be honest and you communicate and you find a solution. Because trying to bury it, like we've seen that so many times where people try to bury it, and then I'll get a call from an agent. Hey, can you help me out? Like we had this happen. Okay, where are you in the process? Oh, we're supposed to close tomorrow. Like what?
Right.
How do you get to that stage and then find out there's a problem? Have you had late conversations with buyers where they went away from what your recommendation was and then had a problem and then had to switch at the last second?
I have. And the situation, it was exactly like the conversation we just had. The buyer wanted to use a bank that their mom had used, so the mom was very much like, use this bank. Wasn't even the same person, right? So I gave the whole speech, and they just were kind of like, the mom was pretty involved. And so the lender got fired from the bank because they leaked their social security number, like in an insecure way.
Wow. And
then there was additional fees at the end that the buyers did not know about. And to these buyers, every penny mattered. So the extra $1,600 rate buy down that they were not told about really mattered. And the manager of the bank was not able to remove that fee. And so This buyer sadly said, Holly, everything you said came true and was right, and I should have listened. And it's sad.
You don't want to be right, huh?
It was too late, and they paid an extra $1,600 for a rate buy down. That's my pet peeve too, is, oh, look at this rate, and really it costs money. So you, again, how can you trust your lender, right? There's people out there that do that. So know that you're working with someone that doesn't want to deceive you, that doesn't benefit from deceiving you. A bank lender, all day, they're just going to keep sitting at their desk. They're just going to keep getting paid their hourly wage. It doesn't come back on them if someone has a bad experience or you weren't upfront about fees. Someone else is going to deal with that, and they're just going to keep sitting at their desk living their life.
Well, and there's some lenders out there that we won't name necessarily, but that is their business model. Like they will throw out these quotes with crazy low interest rates, and they have to disclose the cost, the points that they charge. But man, is it buried? Like I had a past client that we just looked at one, honestly, this is not being, bragging or anything, but she would have not gotten the house last year if it was not for us, because she was actually holding things back from us that we discovered along the way. And then we were able to get them fixed. Anyway, she was good enough to contact us and say, hey, I got this stuff in the mail. Here, I got this quote. What do you think of it? And the interest rate was about 1.5 points lower than what the market was at. And of course, people look at that and they get the big eyes like, oh,
yeah.
And I went through the numbers. I looked at the quote that they gave, and it wasn't really a loan estimate. It was just kind of like a sales sheet.
Mhm.
And it says like you're going to save $700 a month because it was a refinance consolidating some debts. And then one little part it said the time to recoup the cost on the loan was 33 months. So if you think about it, like 33 months, okay, that's not horrible. Like, okay, doesn't sound too bad, but I'm getting this like, really low interest rate. And I said, well, let's do the math. What's 33 months times $700 in savings? So you're like $30,000 in loan cost. Like, does that sound like a good idea? And so that's the kind of things that's just how they do it. Like they count on people just looking at an interest rate without regard to anything else. And, that's where people kind of get sucked in. And, the deceptiveness, if you will, that you're talking about, or the taking advantage of, I mean, it's built into the practices of some companies out there. And like,
Yes.
unless you know how to investigate it, like you won't figure it out. And that's why just a referral from a real estate agent to somebody that is not going to pull that, with people is so important.
Thank you for saying, unless you know how to investigate it, because that is what I tell my buyers. If you use this random lender and they tell you 6% is your rate, you have no way. Like there's like 73 factors that go into someone's rate, right? That's what I heard one time, maybe a little less than that, but there's so much, and you don't have the ability to double check. Is that the par rate, or are they upcharging me because they're making more on the back end? You have to trust that lender when they say that that's your rate. So tell me again how you have that trust in this random person that, it doesn't matter if you succeed or not.
Yeah, that was really what caught my attention when you were speaking to our group, is like, it's such a great question, is how do you know you can trust them? Like, that's a great question, because the answer usually is, well, I don't really know.
Yeah.
And where, you can make that reference like, hey, I have a history that I know that you can trust these people, and that's why I recommend them.
Yeah.
So one last thing I just wanted to ask you, just hopefully have a little fun answer to this.
Okay.
What's one of the craziest things that you've had happen in your real estate career?
Ooh. Oh gosh. I did want to say something real quick.
Sure.
That hasn't happened to me, but there are multiple times that I have coworkers that have had this happen, where like our preferred lender told somebody you can't be approved because of this. And then they went to the local bank, got approved, and couldn't end up buying the house and lost earnest money because of that one reason that lender said it's not going to work because of this. And so I just feel like in this conversation, if anyone made it this far and is listening, to really understand too the difference between banks saying, oh yeah, you're approved and we'll figure it out later, and someone digging in up front and really looking out for you, because that cost that buyer a lot of earnest money, and they thought they were so cool. Oh, the bank will approve me, no problem. Well, there is a difference in that upfront work, and I just wanted to say that.
Well, especially when you're waiving all your contingencies, like that is critical, because you're putting your money on the line based on the word of the lender. And, if you can't trust that they know what they're doing, which unfortunately, just the business structures of a lot of banks, you don't have the most knowledgeable people up front. Usually the people that really know whether or not you can be approved, they're at the end.
Yeah.
And, with a local mortgage company, we try to have those people in the front so that you find out right up front and don't risk your money.
Beautiful. I'm glad people are learning that, because they just don't know. They just don't know. And thank you for having this conversation and helping spread the message. I love that. So the craziest thing that has happened in my career, would you rather hear buyer or seller? I need to kind of.
The crazier of the two.
Oh gosh. Okay. Well, okay. My brain's trying to put it through a filter of what would help somebody? What's the story that would,
We're just looking for funny.
I had the listing. We got this awesome seeming offer, and they did not put on the purchase and sale agreement how they were taking title. And I will never not ask again, because it was a boyfriend-girlfriend, but boyfriend had a wife in a nursing home that, has had health issues, and they're supposed to be getting divorced. But he was on the loan, off the loan, on the loan, total mess. I can't even tell you the nuttiness of this transaction and these personalities, and it was detrimental to the sellers. And be honest with your agent and your lender, because it almost cost them the home and it would have cost them their earnest money. And all over, like, just kind of not being forthcoming from the beginning. That's, people think that they can keep information to themselves, and it will come out and it could cost you money. So don't do that. That's not necessarily a funny story, but it was more recent, and it consumed everybody for a week. And but I don't feel like that was a funny story.
That's okay. But no, I mean, it's a good lesson though, because sometimes people think, I mean, we see it happen. I don't want to say all the time, but we see it happen. Like, people try to hide stuff.
Yeah.
I think we're not going to find out. We are going to find out. Like,
Yeah.
we will guaranteed find out. So don't bother trying to hide it. Like, it's going to come out.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that we can work with, or, you know, figure out an alternative or whatever. That's our job. That's what we're here to do. Sometimes it's, you know, maybe an embarrassment of a situation. It's like, you know what, we've heard it all. Like, we're not here to judge anybody.
Yeah.
You know, I had a client who was, everybody involved in the transaction, he was an older gentleman, and he had a much younger wife, and he was buying a house way outside of his means, and everyone knew what was up. And it was one of those sad things, because, like, you don't want to burst his bubble.
Yeah.
But everyone knew what was going on. And it's like, there was a lot of little things that were kind of getting hidden through the process. And then as we kept peeling back the layers of the onion, like, we kept finding out. And it was a much more difficult situation than it needed to be. So just, be honest with everybody. Tell people what's up. And if there's a way to work around it, we'll work around it.
Yeah. I have a good little, like, humanity quick story that I think I love to share this one. I had the buyer, competitive market. They loved the home. We got it. We weren't the highest on that one. And they did an inspection. We had to do a really fast inspection, and they were pregnant. They found some definite, like, electrical safety issues with the house. So we had to ask for repairs, which we were told up front, that's not going to fly. But they decided they had to ask for, like, the minimum of what would make the home livable for them. And so we asked, and the listing agent called me and, are you crazy? I have 3 other offers that didn't even have an inspection period and backup. Like, we're just going to sell to them. Why would you ask for anything? Just berated me like I was just a dumb agent for even asking, right? And I had a feeling, like, say whatever you want, but I want to see what your seller actually will sign off on. Is your seller going to reject this, or is your seller going to understand that these buyers are asking for the minimum and these are extreme safety issues? So I kept my buyers calm and said, let's just see what actually comes back. And it came back, and they accepted our repair requests. So we moved forward despite the agent swearing that we weren't going to get anything. The seller did what they needed to do. We closed. That seller called me after closing and said, my agent can never know that I called you and had this conversation. He wanted to meet me in public and give me cash to give to my buyers, because he actually wanted to do more for them, and his agent wouldn't let that happen.
Wow.
And he said, you know, we know her. We've used her before. She's a real hard ass, he said, and I just couldn't reason with her. But I saw what your explanation, and I met this man in a Starbucks parking lot, and he gave me $500 to give to my buyers.
Wow.
And so I was just like, you know what? Like, agents, just sometimes you, like, go with your gut, and people are good people. And that's why I say it's a conversation too. So you never know what clients on the other side are really thinking of. So I thought that was heartwarming and interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's still good people out there, and, like, it's gotten so cutthroat in the last, couple of years that sometimes just the humanity of people is kind of kicked to the side, and you realize that it's still there. Like, we just got to let it out sometimes. Like, get the filter out of the way and let it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I really, really appreciate you taking the time. If somebody is listening and wanting to get a hold of you, tell us your contact information so we can get that out there for them.
Awesome. Okay. So my phone number, text me, call me, 360-631-2753. And that would be the best way.
Sounds good. Well, again, thank you very much for joining us here today. Hopefully we got some good information out there to the public. And I can't say thank you enough. I'll just keep saying it over and over again.
I want to thank you, because this is the stuff that goes on in my brain, and I struggle with like how to like get the message out. And so this was awesome for me as well. And anyone that gets to listen and is thinking about going through this process, this was a lot of value. So thank you for being the reason that this chat took place and is getting out there.
All right, my pleasure. Thank you very much, Holly. Take care. We'll see you guys all next time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us, and please remember to go and subscribe, like, share, all that cool stuff to help us grow, and come back tomorrow to listen to our next episode. Until then, go out and live life uncensored.
Thanks for listening to the Uncensored Real Estate Podcast. Don't forget to help us out and subscribe. Follow and give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform. And check us out on YouTube for the full video podcast. If you want more information on any of the topics discussed on today's episode, email us at uncensoredrealestatepodcast@gmail.com or give the Cardenas Mortgage Team a call at 480-331-4684.